We're on to the Houston Texans. We got C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins, and Will Anderson, while Trevor also considered Laramie Tunsil and Derek Stingley Jr.
But did not, at least seemingly, consider Stephon Diggs or Donnell Hunter.
Interesting. The two big off-season additions. Was there other criteria? This wasn't future-based criteria, obviously. Just top three at the moment?
I believe so. Doesn't mention, there's no kind of stipulations on requirements.
Yeah, I mean, this is where Houston is now. Again, in contrast to some of the other teams that we've talked about, there's a good 6 or 7 players because like Tunsil's one of the best left tackles in the NFL.
Tunsil, I think, should be on the list.
Stingley, you talked about, it's a career year. Yeah, he had a career year, but it matched with the draft pedigree, what we thought we saw from him on film at LSU at a peak. Stingley deserves consideration here. Will Anderson, I mean, he makes a ton of sense. He stepped right in and, as expected, looked like an impact player as the number 3 overall pick. Nico Collins is the interesting one that for, your previous discussion about coming off a career year like a Matabike, maybe you want to see it one more time before you declare Nico Collins in there.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, the sort of debate between the veteran that just got brought in and the young player on the roster. So, Nico Collins versus Stephon Diggs. Like, Collins is coming off a career year, a breakout year, by far the best season of his career. He was ascending anyway, but obviously the arrival of C.J. Stroud absolutely turbocharged that and, put him on this crazy pace. Meanwhile, Stephon Diggs is coming off like a bad season relative to his baseline and a bad second half of the bad season. So, and he's, over 30 years old. So you're sort of like, well, is one guy on the rise and the other guy on the way down, or is actually that's the high water mark for Collins, it's the low water mark for Diggs. You're probably going to get something in the middle for both guys, and that would probably lean in Diggs' favor. Like if you sort of split the difference for what you expect each guy to have and what they did last season, you probably end up with a higher baseline, like your middle chart of the bell curve of expectations for each guy. The middle is probably higher for Diggs than it is for Collins if you were doing it that way. And then also with Anderson versus Donnell Hunter, I think Hunter's a better player than Anderson right now, but will that be the case next year? Or, again, is one guy, it was very early, obviously, with Will Anderson, is year 2 going to be special and year 3, higher than anything we've seen from Donnell Hunter in his entire career?
I think I'm good with Anderson over Hunter. So interesting breakdown using PFF grades and WAR. Anderson and Hunter very, very close in grade, 81.6 to 78. WAR was very close, 0.27 for Anderson versus 0.22 for Hunter. But Hunter has averaged the same WAR over the last 3 seasons that Will Anderson had in his rookie season last year, right? So basically Will Anderson stepped in as a rookie and provided the same value on the field as Donnell Hunter over the last 3 years. So I understand that. I mean, there's a fair conversation between both, but Anderson as a rookie, don't forget, we've seen rookies come in and play really well, and then in year 2, talking about defensive linemen here, J.J. Watt did it, very good as a rookie, took off, soared in year 2. Aaron Donald, very good as a rookie, soared in year 2. Aiden Hutchinson, I think similar, right? Second half of rookie season was very good, but year 2, boom, took off. Will Anderson has that opportunity to do that, I believe, this year. So I'm good with Will Anderson. I think there's more of a discussion between Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. I'll admit, I struggle sometimes, Sam, with knowing, how scouts could probably look at, this dude's losing a step, not the same.
Yeah.
Knowing when that older guy, we're talking, in your late 20s.
Right.
When the older player is losing it just a touch. And it doesn't mean that they're never going to be good again, but I struggle with that, right? Like when the Titans traded for Julio Jones a couple years ago, I'm like, of course, it's Julio Jones.
Right.
Even if he loses a step, he'll still be great, but sometimes it's way worse than it feels. I'm not saying that is Stephon Diggs, but it's an interesting discussion between, as you mentioned, the ascending Nico Collins and seemingly leveled off Stephon Diggs.
And even just where the line is in terms of age, for these guys. Like, obviously quarterback has been put into a weird place because of Tom Brady. Rodgers is 40 years old, and there's still just a couple of guys that have been productive at that kind of age, and yet one of them was the most recent guy. In fact, two of them were were two of the most recent quarterbacks. So you're like, well, Rodgers could easily play at a top 5 level. Now, the guy that really kind of reset expectations in terms of longevity for wide receivers was Jerry Rice, who stopped playing years ago, right? So we still see wide receiver as this cutoff point at like 30 is the time to start getting worried, right? As opposed to 40. So at that point, you start looking at guys like Stephon Diggs or Keenan Allen or Mike Evans or any of these guys, and you're like, they're right at the edge. Any year now is the year they stop being good. But it could easily, in today's world of modern medicine, et cetera, like you could easily have 3-4 more years of high-level Stephon Diggs. And if you get that, he's probably a better bet than Collins.
All right, so, good for the Texans that we're debating this many players, and I think that's why so many people are high on what Houston has going for them this year.
Yep.